I pulled into my childhood driveway after 780 miles, and my own mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't live here anymore." But here's what's really terrifying about what happened next. The alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., but I was already awake. Had been for hours, actually. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed a bag of jumping beans. Today was the day I'd drive 780 miles to see family I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Loading my beat-up Honda took longer than expected. 2 suitcases, a cooler full of snacks, and enough anxiety to fuel a small rocket. The trunk barely closed. Makes sense, right? When you're carrying the weight of unresolved family drama, even your luggage gets heavier. I pulled out of my driveway as the sun painted the sky orange and pink. Beautiful morning for what might be a complete disaster. The highway stretched ahead like a question mark. Would this trip fix everything or make it worse? Well, only one way to find out. My phone playlist became my therapist for the next 12 hours. Spotify shuffled between old country songs that reminded me of home and pop hits that reminded me why I left in the first place. Funny how music can make you homesick and grateful for distance at the same time. Then there were the pit stops, gas stations every 2 hours like clockwork, each one a reminder of just how far I'd moved from everyone I used to know. The attendant in Tennessee had the same accent as my uncle. The waitress at that roadside diner in Kentucky looked exactly like my cousin Sarah. Even strangers were making me nostalgic. And the weird part is, I started doing math on napkins. Gas prices had jumped since my last road trip. What I thought would cost maybe $60 turned into a $120 nightmare. Credit card felt hot in my wallet every time I swiped it. But hey, you can't put a price on family reconciliation, right? Right? Mile markers became my best friends. 780 miles sounds manageable until you're actually driving it. Your back starts aching around mile 300. Your playlist repeats twice. You begin having full conversations with highway billboards about whether you really need to visit that world's largest ball of yarn. Let's not forget the bathroom breaks at questionable rest stops. You know, the ones where the soap dispenser hasn't worked since 1987 and the paper towels are rougher than sandpaper. But when you're 8 hours into a drive fueled by gas station coffee, you're not exactly picky about amenities. The sun started setting as I crossed into my home state. Golden hour hit differently when you're driving toward uncertainty. Part of me wanted to turn around. The rational part reminded me I'd already spent more on gas than my monthly Netflix subscription. As darkness crept in, my headlights illuminated familiar road signs, exit names I recognized from childhood. My heart rate picked up speed. After 12 hours of highway hypnosis, I was almost there. But arriving somewhere and being welcome are two completely different things, something I was about to learn the hard way. The white colonial house sat there like a time capsule. Same green shutters, same cracked driveway where I used to draw hopscotch squares with sidewalk chalk 20 years ago. Even the mailbox had that familiar dent from when my cousin backed into it during Christmas of 2003. I pulled up slowly, engine ticking as it cooled down. My heart was doing this weird drumbeat thing against my ribs. You know that feeling when you're about to take a final exam you studied months for? That's exactly what this felt like. Except the stakes felt way higher than any grade. The neighborhood looked frozen in amber. Mrs. Peterson's garden gnome still stood guard by her front steps. The Johnsons' basketball hoop had the same rusty rim that never held a net properly. Nothing had changed, which somehow made everything feel more surreal. I sat in my car rehearsing the conversation for probably the 15th time since crossing the state line. "Hey, it's been too long." No, too casual. "I've missed you all so much." Too emotional right off the bat. "I wanted to come see you." Simple, direct, honest. My hands were actually trembling as I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk. 12 hours of driving, 3 energy drinks, and 2 gas station sandwiches had led to this exact moment. The weight of that suitcase felt like nothing compared to the weight of my expectations. A neighbor across the street waved from her porch. I waved back, grateful someone was happy to see me. She probably didn't even recognize me after all these years, but her smile felt like a good sign. Maybe this whole town still had that small-town friendliness I remembered. Walking up the front steps, I noticed the same loose board on the 3rd step that used to creak whenever we tried sneaking in past curfew. Some things never change, right? The doormat was new, though. It said "Welcome" in cheerful yellow letters. Another good sign. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. This was it. All those years of silence, All those birthdays and holidays that passed without a single phone call or text message. All those nights wondering if I'd made the right choice by staying away so long. The doorbell made the same two-note chime I remembered. Ding dong. Simple as that, such a normal sound for such a monumental moment. My palms were sweating despite the cool evening air. I wiped them on my jeans and tried to arrange my face into something that looked confident but not cocky, hopeful but not desperate. What do you even do with your hands when you're about to face the people you've been avoiding for half a decade? Then there is that terrible moment of silence after you ring a doorbell. You can hear movement inside, footsteps getting closer, your stomach drops because you realize there's no backing out now. But what happened next would shatter every expectation I'd carefully built during that long drive home. The door creaked open just a few inches, barely enough for me to see inside. A familiar face appeared in that narrow gap, someone I'd shared countless family dinners with, someone who used to laugh at my terrible jokes during holiday gatherings. Wrong house, they said flatly. But here's the thing, I could literally see our old family photo hanging on the wall behind them. The one from my high school graduation where everyone was squished together, making those awkward forced smiles. You know the type? The door didn't just close, it slammed. Hard. The windows actually rattled from the impact. I'm not being dramatic here. The whole frame shook like something out of a movie. Except this wasn't a movie, and there wasn't going to be some heartwarming reconciliation scene with swelling music. I just stood there, frozen. Have you ever had one of those moments where your brain completely stops working, where reality hits so hard that your body forgets how to function? That was me on that porch. My hand was still raised from knocking, like some weird statue of confusion. The seconds ticked by, 1, 2, 5, 10. My suitcase sat next to me, still heavy with all the clothes I'd carefully folded for what I thought would be a week-long visit. Maybe longer if things went well. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd packed enough underwear for a small vacation, but I wouldn't even make it past the front door. Then there's this wild statistic I learned later. Only about 20% of relatives actually attempt direct confrontation during estrangement disputes. Most people just disappear quietly, like ghosts. But not me. I'd driven 780 miles to become part of that brave, stupid 20%. The neighbor who'd waved earlier was probably watching this whole disaster unfold from their kitchen window. Small towns love their drama, especially when it's free entertainment delivered right to someone's doorstep. My phone buzzed. For a split second, hope flickered. Maybe they were texting to explain, to invite me back, to say this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Nope, just a notification that my data was running low. Well, that seemed fitting. I picked up my suitcase handle and felt its weight differently now. Everything felt different. The familiar porch steps, the garden I used to help tend, even the air itself seemed hostile, like the whole house was rejecting me. Not just the person inside. The wrong house comment kept echoing in my head. Wrong house, as if I didn't know where I'd spent summers as a kid. As if I hadn't memorized every crack in that sidewalk from years of hopscotch games, but maybe they were right in a way I didn't expect yet. Maybe this wasn't the same house I remembered at all. Maybe nothing here was what I thought it would be. What happens when the place you call home decides you don't belong there anymore? Standing there on that porch, I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. The GPS showed I was exactly where I needed to be. The house number matched perfectly. Even the faded blue mailbox confirmed what I already knew deep down. This was definitely the right place. But here's what really gets me. I'm not alone in this mess. 1 in 4 Americans is estranged from a close family member right now. That's roughly 65 million people walking around with invisible wounds from family rejection. Makes you wonder how many strangers you pass each day who understand exactly what standing on that porch felt like. Most of these family splits don't happen overnight either. They build up like pressure in a kettle until something finally makes it whistle. The door slamming in my face wasn't really about me showing up unannounced. It was the final note in a song that had been playing for years. Then there's the silence that follows. My calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages sat there with no response, not even those little read receipts, just digital tumbleweeds rolling across my phone screen. The person who used to call me on my birthday suddenly acted like my number didn't exist. Turns out this radio silence is textbook behavior. Research shows that 68% of estranged families use avoidance as their main way of setting boundaries. No confrontation, no explanation, no closure. Just complete communication shutdown. Well, at least they're consistent, right? What really messed with my head was how normal everything else looked. The neighbor still waved like nothing had changed. The same garden gnome sat by the front steps. Even the squeaky gate made the exact same sound I remembered from childhood visits. But somehow I'd become a stranger in the place that should have felt most like home. The weirdest part? I kept checking my phone like maybe I'd missed some crucial message that would explain everything. Maybe there was a family group chat I'd been removed from. Maybe everyone got a memo about me, except, well, me, but my inbox stayed empty. And the confusion just kept growing. Standing there in that familiar neighborhood, I realized something unsettling. Family estrangement isn't like breaking up with a boyfriend or losing touch with college friends. When family cuts you off, they take your history with them. All those shared memories, inside jokes, and childhood stories suddenly belong to people who pretend you don't exist. The sun was starting to set, and I had nowhere to go. Hotel apps became my best friend as I searched for somewhere cheap to spend the night. My road trip budget hadn't included emergency accommodation, and my credit card was already crying from the gas expenses. But standing there in the growing darkness, I couldn't shake one nagging question that would keep me awake all night. How exactly does a family relationship die without anyone bothering to write an obituary? The answer to that mystery would soon reveal itself in ways I never expected. Standing on that porch, staring at a door that had just slammed in my face, I needed answers. The rejection felt like a punch to the gut, but something deeper was eating at me. How does a family just disappear on each other? Turns out I wasn't alone in this mess. Family estrangement has become what experts are calling a hidden crisis. The numbers are staggering when you really dig into them. We're talking about millions of families who've basically ghosted each other, and most people have no clue how common it really is. Here's the thing that blew my mind: 41% of family rifts start because of one specific action by one person. Just one moment, one fight, one decision that changes everything forever, makes you wonder what I did, right? Well, I was still trying to figure that out myself. But the research gets even weirder. Most estrangements don't actually come from that one big blowout fight you see in movies. Instead, they build up slowly over years of unresolved conflicts that nobody wants to talk about. It's like emotional debt that keeps accumulating interest until the whole system crashes. Divorce plays a huge role these days. When parents split up and create blended families, the dynamics get complicated fast. Step-parents, half-siblings, custody battles. It's like trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded. Add in political arguments, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Families are literally splitting up over Facebook posts now. Then there's the generational factor that nobody talks about. Older generations were raised to keep family business private and respect your elders no matter what. Younger generations, they're more likely to cut ties if something feels toxic or harmful. Different playbooks, same game. Social media makes everything worse, obviously. You can't just disagree with your uncle about politics anymore. Now his opinions are blasted across your feed every single day. That constant exposure to family members' thoughts and beliefs creates friction that didn't exist 20 years ago. Your racist cousin can't just be racist at Thanksgiving dinner anymore. Now he's racist in your notifications every Tuesday. The geography factor surprised me too. Americans move around way more than previous generations. When you live 780 miles away from family, relationships require more effort to maintain. It's easier to let things slide, easier to avoid difficult conversations, easier to just stop trying. And the weird part is how silent it all becomes. Unlike divorce or death, estrangement doesn't come with social scripts or support systems. There are no greeting cards for "sorry your daughter won't speak to you" or "congrats on finally cutting off your toxic brother." People suffer through this alone, thinking they're the only ones dealing with family members who vanished from their lives. The research revealed something else that hit close to home. Americans are almost as likely to be estranged from siblings as from parents. Brother-sister relationships, which you'd think would be more flexible, can fracture just as easily. But understanding the statistics didn't make my situation hurt any less. What I was discovering would make the scope of this problem even more shocking. Family estrangement has become what experts now call a silent epidemic. The numbers are staggering. Up to 1 in 4 American adults deals with some form of family cutoff. That's roughly 67 million people walking around with invisible wounds that nobody talks about at dinner parties. The silence makes it worse. People assume something must be terribly wrong with you if your own family won't speak to you. Society still clings to the myth that blood is thicker than water, no matter what. But here's what researchers have discovered. Most estrangements happen for surprisingly valid reasons. Emotional safety ranks as the top motivation. When family members become toxic, abusive, or consistently harmful to someone's mental health, cutting contact becomes self-preservation. It's not dramatic teenage rebellion. It's adults making calculated decisions about their well-being. The psychology behind these splits runs deeper than most people realize. Dr. Joshua Coleman, who studies family estrangement, found that many cutoffs stem from fundamental value differences that develop over decades. Parents and children grow into completely different people with incompatible worldviews. Political beliefs, religious changes, lifestyle choices, these create chasms that feel impossible to bridge. Then there's the generational shift happening right now. Younger adults prioritize mental health and personal boundaries in ways their parents never did. Baby boomers often view therapy and self-care as weakness. Generation X and millennials see them as essential life skills. This clash creates friction that can explode into permanent separation. The shame factor keeps families trapped in cycles of silence. Nobody wants to admit their family is broken. Extended relatives take sides. Friends don't know what to say. Social media makes it worse. Everyone else's family looks perfect in carefully curated photos. What surprised me most during my research was learning that estrangement rarely happens overnight. Most families experience years of mounting tension, failed attempts at reconciliation, and repeated boundary violations before someone finally says enough. The door slam I experienced was just the final chapter in a much longer story. Both sides usually carry legitimate pain. The person who cuts contact feels hurt, unheard, or unsafe. The person being cut off feels confused, rejected, or unfairly punished. Neither side is entirely wrong, which makes resolution incredibly difficult. Mental health professionals report seeing more estrangement cases than ever before. The pandemic made everything worse. Families discovered they couldn't even agree on basic health precautions. Political divisions became personal attacks. People realized they genuinely didn't like spending time with relatives they were supposed to love unconditionally. The grief that follows estrangement mirrors losing someone to death, except the person is still alive somewhere, choosing not to be in your life. There's no funeral, no closure ritual, no casseroles from neighbors, just an empty space where a relationship used to be. Recovery becomes possible when people stop viewing estrangement as failure and start seeing it as information. Sometimes families don't work, despite everyone's best efforts. Accepting that reality opens the door to healing and building new connections elsewhere. But the immediate aftermath of rejection still hits like a freight train. That motel room felt like a prison cell. The walls were beige, the carpet smelled like decades of cigarettes, and the bed creaked every time I moved. Sleep? Not happening. My brain kept replaying that door slamming shut over and over like a broken record. I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m., wondering how I'd gotten it so wrong. Maybe I was naive thinking a surprise visit would fix everything. But what else was I supposed to do? Send a formal letter requesting an appointment with my own family? The harsh reality hit me while scrolling through my phone at dawn. Most estrangement situations become permanent. Yeah, you heard that right. Permanent. Studies show only a small fraction of severed family relationships ever get repaired. The rest just stay broken forever. Well, that's encouraging. Then there's the holiday factor, which I hadn't even considered yet. Christmas was only 3 months away. Thanksgiving even sooner. Research shows 36% of estranged people completely skip family gatherings to avoid the drama and awkwardness. They'd rather spend major holidays alone than risk another door getting slammed in their face. Makes sense, right? Who wants to show up to Thanksgiving dinner knowing half the family might pretend you don't exist? But here's where things got interesting. After checking out of that depressing motel, I did something I'd never done before. I shared my story online. Nothing too detailed, just the basics about driving 780 miles to get rejected by family. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments poured in within hours. People sharing their own stories of rejection, their own 12-hour drives that ended in disappointment, their own family photos glimpsed through cracked doors before everything went dark. And the weird part is, reading those stories made me feel less crazy, less alone. One woman drove from Texas to Maine only to have her sister call the police. A guy flew across the country for his father's birthday and got escorted off the property. Another person hadn't spoken to their brother in 8 years over a wedding invitation mishap. 8 years. Let's not forget the sheer scale of this problem. Thousands of people face similar rejections every single year. We're not talking about rare occurrences or dramatic movie plots. This is everyday life for millions of Americans who wake up knowing their own family considers them unwelcome. The comments kept coming. Stories of missed graduations, forgotten birthdays, grandchildren who don't know their relatives exist. Each story felt like looking in a mirror, seeing my own confusion and hurt reflected back through different circumstances but identical emotions. Some commenters offered advice, others just wanted to vent. A few shared success stories about eventual reconciliation, though those were definitely the minority. Most just acknowledged the pain and moved on with their lives. Reading through everything, one thing became crystal clear. I wasn't going to solve this family puzzle overnight, maybe not ever. But I wasn't the only person trying to figure out how to build a life when the people who raised you decide you no longer exist. The question now was what comes next when family isn't an option. The rejection stung like hell, but something unexpected happened in that cheap motel room. I started scrolling through online forums at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. Turns out I wasn't alone in this mess. Thousands of people share similar stories every single day. The comments section looked like a support group I never knew existed. Chosen family became my new favorite phrase. It sounds cheesy at first, but it's actually pretty genius. These are the friends who show up when your actual family won't. They remember your birthday when your sister pretends you don't exist. They call you back when your parents screen your calls. Building these connections takes serious time though. You can't just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, wanna be my replacement sibling?" Well, you could try. But that's probably gonna end badly. Trust develops slowly, especially when you're carrying baggage from family drama. The weird part is how healing this process becomes. When someone chooses to care about you, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. It hits different. Blood relatives are stuck with you, whether they like it or not. Chosen family picks you on purpose. Let's not forget the statistics here paint a clearer picture than most people realize. Over half of estranged Americans eventually find peace through distance rather than reconciliation. That number shocked me initially. We're taught that family always comes first, but sometimes family comes last in terms of emotional safety. Moving forward meant accepting that some doors stay closed forever. My family's door was apparently one of them, but other doors opened in unexpected places. The neighbor who brought me coffee during my darkest week became a lifeline. The coworker who invited me to their holiday dinner became my new tradition. Reconnecting with myself turned out to be the real game changer. All those years I'd been trying to fit into their version of who I should be. Exhausting doesn't even cover it. When you stop performing for people who don't appreciate the show anyway, you discover who you actually are underneath all that effort. The healing isn't linear though. Some days feel great, others feel like garbage. Grief shows up at weird moments, like when you see a commercial about family dinners or hear someone complaining about their annoying relatives. You'd give anything for annoying relatives who still talk to you. Then there's the freedom aspect. Nobody talks about. No more walking on eggshells during phone calls. No more dreading holiday invitations that never come anyway. No more wondering if this conversation will be the one that finally fixes everything. That mental space opens up for better relationships with people who actually value you. Support groups, both online and in person, became crucial resources. Turns out, estrangement affects way more people than anyone admits publicly. We're all just quietly dealing with empty chairs at our dinner tables, pretending it doesn't hurt. The journey taught me that closure doesn't always come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes closure comes from accepting that their chapter in your story is finished and you're the author of what happens next.